Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Thank you for joining me. So much to cover from over the weekend. No rest for the wicked, politically speaking. However, let's go back from just last Tuesday. We started seeing some headlines here locally in the state of Georgia that give some optimism. Americans say they want bipartisanship, and dare I say we might be seeing this here in the state of Georgia. Jill Nolan, the Georgia Recorder, reporting that a handful of rural Georgia Republicans are joining with Democrats to give, get this, y'all, full Medicaid expansion another go. I mean, a different name for it, but still, the premise is there. Here to explain what has happened, what has brought some rural Republicans on board with Democrats who have been trying to give Medicaid expansion a go for several years now, is one of those Democrats, Senator Jason Estevez from the 6th District. He has been working hard to try and make this happen in years past, and there's light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. Senator Estevez, thanks for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron. Appreciate it.
So what has changed? What brought some rural Georgia Republicans on board with Democrats in this political cycle that gives us the opportunity to maybe see Georgia join with most of the rest of the nation when it comes to full Medicaid expansion?
Well, look, Ron, progress is slowly but surely being made. I think that Democrats and Republicans alike are tired of the politics that are being played on this issue. When you look at the fact that 40 other states have fully expanded Medicaid and Georgia is lagging behind in doing that, but has also seen hospital closures. We've seen increase in our maternal mortality rate. We've seen a number of practices leave our state for the lack of insurance coverage. We're in crisis, and our healthcare system needs a boost, especially in rural Georgia. So those rural Republicans signed on because they see Medicaid expansion as a common sense solution. And they've also seen that Governor Kemp's Pathways to Coverage plan has been a waste of money. It's $30 million to cover 6,000 people. And for those trying to do the math at home, that is much more expensive than traditional Medicaid expansion.
So that being said, it's going to, if it passes the General Assembly, have to land on his desk. Is that going to be a tough task, you think?
Yes. I want to make sure that people understand the reality. And that reality is that the Republican leaders in the General Assembly and Governor Kemp have both said that Medicaid expansion is not happening under his watch. So we still have a long hill to climb. It's going to require people mobilizing, and it's going to require some Republicans not listening to their leadership. And we've already had 4 Republicans do that. Our hope is that we can convince many more to do the same thing. But I want to make sure that people understand that Medicaid expansion is not happening yet. It's going to require us continuing to push and to make sure that we put pressure on Republican leaders to finally do what makes common sense for everyday Georgians.
Yeah, so we're talking about 4 Senate Republicans. We don't know what number could be moved in the House chamber yet, or do we have a sense? Are you doing, or some whips doing some vote counts on that side?
Yeah, we don't quite have a sense of what's happening in the House. The Senate is going to be tough enough because we have Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who has said that he doesn't see Medicaid expansion happening under his watch. And if people recall from last session, it was Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones who actually appointed enough people in the hearing, enough of his allies in the hearing to make sure that Medicaid expansion did not pass a committee hearing that we had last year. So with the lieutenant governor, with the governor, with the Speaker of the House, all 3 saying that they don't see Medicaid expansion happening, we would need a significant number of Republicans in both chambers turning their backs on leadership and standing with the people of Georgia. Look, Ron, I want to make this perfectly clear that this is not only the right thing to do, it makes economic sense. Right now, we are getting about 66 cents on the dollar from the federal government for the Medicaid payments that we are making. If we fully expanded Medicaid, we would be getting 90 cents on the dollar. Not only that, we would get an additional $1 billion from the federal government. That is hard-earned taxpayer money that is going to other states because we have not opted into full Medicaid expansion. So if we were to do that, Georgians would retain a lot of that money, billions of dollars, right here in this state.
Well, and even if it's just sitting in the Treasury right now, Elon Musk seems to have the keys to the building, so we don't know what he's going to do with it. I'm kidding.
No, that's a real concern and a topic for another day.
Oh my gosh, yeah, a little foreshadowing for what I'll dive into later in the show, no doubt about it. Yeah, here's the thing. I'm pretty. I'm like you. I'm skeptical about passage, obviously, but I'm also noting the fact that we have rural Republicans who are, who are showing some of their suburban compatriots throughout the rest of the state. Y'all, we need this in our neck of the woods too. I've been critical in the past of state and federal level Democrats not going to flyover states, not going to rural portions of the state to campaign to bring their issues to voters there. And I get it. Sometimes it's a numbers game. Sometimes there's only so many dates on the calendar, so many hours in a day. But this is one of those, to me, glimmers of light right there that show you that there's life out there. You got to go out there and try and harvest, some minds to see things your way. And I think that is something we're seeing in this case.
Well, Ron, I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't get it. I don't get why Democrats don't go to rural Georgia.
Oh no,
more than they do.
Yeah, okay, 1,000%. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to say Georgia Democrats do well when we go all across the state, when we crisscross the state, and we talk to people about the issues that we stand for. And when we do that, we win. And what we've seen in the last couple election cycles is that Democrats have shied away from rural areas, and that has cost us.
I agree 1,000%.
Yes. As we look towards this legislative session and beyond, including with the upcoming statewide elections in 2026, we have to make sure that we are taking the message to Georgians all across the state, whether they're in metro areas or rural areas. We have to make sure that they know that we stand for Medicaid expansion. They need to know that we stand for a child tax credit that makes childcare more affordable, that we stand for a strong public education system, which, Ron, in many of these counties in rural Georgia are the leading employers of those areas. So they agree with us on those issues. They also agree with us on the fact that housing is becoming unaffordable, not only in metro Atlanta, but in rural areas as well, as we see Wall Street buying up homes all across the state. So we have to make sure that we are taking the message to them and that they know that we are in Atlanta fighting on behalf of not only metro Atlanta, but rural Georgia as well.
Yeah, in your district, you're in one of those districts that looks really gerrymandered, where you go from like South Fulton up into North Atlanta, and so you cover a good bit of almost rural. I would say some of South Fulton's rural into suburban and the heart of the city of Atlanta and across. So you kind of get a taste of all of those portions of the state, really.
Well, look, and I'm from Columbus, Georgia. My wife is from Albany, Georgia. My sister lives in Augusta, Georgia. So I have pretty good coverage all across the state when it comes to understanding what everyday Georgians are feeling. And I can tell you that they want their elected officials talking to them about kitchen table issues.
Why do you think it's hard for Democrats to paint the picture to make the message clear that Medicaid expansion, universal health care even, is good for business when our neighbor to the north, Canada, their business community, their conservative business community would hate to see it go away? Why is it such a hard sell to American voters?
Well, because we haven't been speaking plain to folks. You know, I'm a small business owner. I own a restaurant in my hometown of Columbus, and I can't afford to give my employees health care. Even if I provided them subsidized health care, they couldn't afford the premium payments, right? And if the state expanded Medicaid, it would help small business owners like me ensure that their employees are healthy. When I think about the reasons why my staff can't come to work, healthcare and childcare are two of the top issues,
Mm-hmm.
and those are two areas where Georgians have seen a massive increase in costs. So we should be doing all that we can at the state capitol to reduce those costs. But what we're seeing is that Georgia Republican leaders refuse to do so, and not only that, they're spending time on issues that ultimately don't matter to the everyday Georgian. So we have to make sure as Georgia Democrats to continue to stay focused on the message and not get distracted, Ron, by what Republicans are talking about. We need to stay focused on the pocketbook, focused on the pocketbook of everyday Georgian, and speak to those issues and offer solutions.
Well, your example, I think, provides a public safety course too. For the health and wellness of the general population, you don't want somebody who is fighting internally whether or not they can afford to miss a day of work versus going to see a doctor, or the cost to do that, which could cost them several days of work, versus going into the kitchen and working over the food that someone else is going to be eating that could get them sick if the person in the kitchen is fighting an illness that they, gambled on coming into work and exposing other people to.
That's right. And look, it also costs the person who's eating that food is insured.
Yeah, exactly.
Because folks who are insured are impacted by the folks who are uninsured.
Mm-hmm.
Because those medical providers have to make up the costs. Those hospitals have to make up the costs for those uninsured patients who can't pay. And most of the time they make up the cost by raising prices on everyone else, on those who are paying. So there's public health costs to what's happening here in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
There's economic costs for business owners, and then there's economic costs for the people who have insurance and have to pay premiums. And for those of us who do have insurance, we know that those premiums have risen significantly. My wife owns a small business. She owns an urgent care, and she has seen the rise in high deductible plans because that's the thing that people can afford.
Yeah, we're getting back to the junk insurance policies that the Affordable Care Act tried to get rid of by even having insurance companies craft these plans that are just that high deductible, high out of pocket, but is something versus the nothing that used to exist. I fully understand that. Senator Jason Estevez from the 6th District of Georgia. Real quick before we go, I want to pivot real quick. We're talking about insurance. Tort reform is on the governor's mind. It's something that he had a bullet in his chamber for from day one, and I want to get your sense on that since we're talking insurance. Is there some common ground that can be found with the governor and Republicans on this, or is this just out of the blue and unexpected and not really the high priority that Governor Kemp seems to be making it?
Well, it's not out of the blue because Republican governors across the country have been touting tort reform as the silver bullet to the increase in insurance costs. The problem that Governor Kemp has is that when you look at Republican governors who have gotten tort reform done, residents have not seen insurance premiums go down.
Right.
Business owners have not seen insurance premiums go down. So my question to Governor Kemp and Georgia Republican leaders down at the Capitol is, where is insurance reform? Where are the policies to ensure that Georgians feel the effects and feel the price break, the reduction in costs of these purported tort reform pieces of legislation? We're not seeing that. And what we've seen in state after state, whether it's Florida or Tennessee or any other state, is that after tort reform happens, within a couple years, premiums continue to go up. And we've spent the last 10 minutes talking about the pain that people are feeling with health insurance. Those premiums go up. I can tell you my car insurance, my home insurance, my business insurance have all gone up. And I can assure you that unless there is some kind of comprehensive insurance reform, our premiums will continue to go up, even if tort reform passes through the legislature.
It's fascinating. We're talking about evidence-based legislating here, and in both cases, Medicaid expansion, there's evidence in the other 40 states that this actually does benefit the consumer and the citizen. And in the case of tort reform, there's no evidence that tort reform elsewhere actually does that. And in both cases, Democrats, I say this all the time, We are the party where logic and data and math and science, they all have a liberal bias. And what are you going to do, right? You've got to accept facts as facts. And in both of these cases, we have evidence-based legislating going on from the left that the right refuses to accept here under the Gold Dome.
Well, and the only thing we can do is continue to speak plainly to residents, to our constituents, and talk to them about the economic costs of these ridiculous policies that the right is pushing.
And I love that. You're absolutely right. We got to go out to these rural counties and start whipping up some of these votes. I think that, as close as Stacey Abrams came in 2018, what if she had gone to Rabun County? What if she'd gone to Vidalia? What if she'd gone, to Vienna, Georgia? Great points. And the same with the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign. That South Georgia bus tour was the Savannah bus tour, and it should have been more South Georgia. I agree 1,000%. Senator Jason Estevez from the 6th District of Georgia. Thanks for joining the Ron Show this morning.
I appreciate you. Anytime.
Lots of global trade talk to dive into, and boy, that's exciting stuff. Aren't you just scintillated? You just want to listen longer, don't you? Actually, Donald Trump from day one has been attacking Georgia manufacturing jobs, and I'm going to explain what one sector he has a laser focus on that actually runs counter to the efforts of Governor Brian Kemp to date, except Brian Kemp seems to also quizzically be supportive of the president's moves on this particular sector. We'll dive into the EV mandate, air quotes, when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. You can follow the Ron Show, by the way, on your preferred social media platforms. That would be at Ron Show ATL. You like Blue Sky? I like Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky, at Ron Show ATL. Twitter X, I'm not leaving that. Instagram, Facebook, I know, folks are leaving Meta. Not me. Staying there. What else am I on? Oh, yeah, Threads. That's a Meta product, too. In any event, let's continue this discussion real quick. I do have a hard break coming up in about 3 minutes, but so it'll prevent me from diving fully into this conversation until we get right back at it. But this discussion about Medicaid expansion, or I could even take it a step further, universal health care, this discussion about electric vehicle mandates, green energy, a Green New Deal, so to speak, from the Biden administration. This is what perplexes me and really just kind of angers me. And actually, you know what? We can even drag diversity, equity, and inclusion into this, and immigration. This is the thing that just enrages me about MAGA and the current form of the Republican Party. The left is actually on the right side of just about all of these things, and from a pro-business perspective. I said what I said. DEI, it's actually good for business. There's been tons of studies on this. Immigration, we all know the impact that cheap labor has on our consumer goods and prices, inflation. We're going to see that. Tariffs, too. That'll definitely cause some problems. But even if we weren't talking about just cheap labor, the fact that, first of all, we're an expansive nation with still plenty of places for people to live, rural communities that are dying on the vine, where we could welcome in the immigrant, those who are seeking asylum for political reasons, environmental reasons, or whatever, and guide them, steer them to where there are portions of our country that need not just that influx of bodies, those people who can fog a mirror, but actually work on some of, long-range plans. We don't think big in this country anymore. I've said this before. We have so many things that we need to be putting actual sweat equity into, and we have people who are coming to this country who seek a better life, a safer environment, and we can marry the two, right? I'm not saying use people. I'm saying make use of people who want to come here and, of course, pay them a commensurate salary and give them the opportunity that they deserve. Let them earn their citizenship. Raising tariffs on Mexico and Canada because of a fentanyl crisis. Well, if we had Medicaid or universal health care, let's just go even a step further. That would include treatment for drug addiction, substance abuse addiction. You wouldn't be worrying about folks who might be taking fentanyl-laced drugs because they wouldn't be taking drugs. And then you're avoiding a trade war that could cost the average consumer anywhere from $1 to $4 extra per day. And then rolling back green energy initiatives when that is clearly the current and future economic growth sector versus fossil fuel exploration and discovery. The Biden administration knew that we could walk and chew gum, that we could actually drill, baby, drill, and be working towards a green energy future. And that's what they did, much to the chagrin of those of us who are anti-fossil fuel. Brian Kemp would never admit it in a million years, but he and the Biden administration were kind of on the same page in that realm. We'll pick up on that conversation when the Ron Show returns.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Let's go to audio from WAGA Fox 5 from over the weekend. This is Kim Leffler reporting.
Hundreds gathered along Buford Highway in Chamblee to speak out against the recent wave of immigration and customs enforcement arrests throughout the country.
We are basically being hunted down by ICE, and it's just, we live in fear, and we are here because we don't want everyone to live in fear, so we're going to speak out.
Joseph Pastor is one of the organizers of this event. He says many in attendance were young people speaking out for their families. This all comes after the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration, also allowing ICE arrests to occur in churches and schools.
Where I work, I get insulted because I work with customers. The racial slurs is just mind-blowing. That's what really motivated me to speak out.
Protesters blocked portions of Buford Highway Saturday afternoon as they marched to another location further down the road, continuing their message of unity. At one point, the group blocked the entrance near Plaza Fiesta before police moved them off the road.
We're here to unite. We're here to say that we won't sit by while any members of our community are attacked. People of all backgrounds need to get together and fight back and build a mass movement to fight for our rights. An attack on immigrants or attack on one part of the community is an attack on the entire working class. It's an attack on all people.
That is the voice, by the way, of Natalie Villasana with the Party for Socialism and Liberation.
Organizers here say they plan to continue to speak out against these recent arrests and lean on each other for support.
I am glad that everyone's here to show their support, and they're showing their culture with pride. It just feels like we're all family. We're all going to support each other since nobody else wants to support us, so we're going to have each other's back.
Something you will never see, by the way, in any news headline, and that would be, ICE going around rounding up CEOs and business owners, big, medium, small business owners who are illegally exploiting undocumented workers. You'll never see that. And before you go asking why, well, the why is obvious. First of all, a lot of folks who are in business, CEOs, or just large, medium, small business owners, they tend to vote conservative. But think about that. If you threaten to deport the business owners, the CEOs who are doing the hiring of the undocumented immigrant, they themselves breaking the law, if you threaten to deport them because of their illegal acts, well, then the illegal acts stop, right? But they're doing it because they realize they need the labor, the cheap labor, the labor that they know that they can skirt local, state, federal employment laws and face no repercussion for breaking those laws. Unlike the undocumented immigrant who has to not only navigate, literally, physically navigate their way here, imperiling themselves with physical harm to get here, and then constantly under intense scrutiny. I mean, what kind of psychological damage does it do to someone to constantly be looking around the corner of their eye, behind their back to make sure that La Migre isn't tracking them? I thought it was actually, when I saw the story that I just gave you the audio for, I was stunned. You mean to tell me that thousands of people, many of whom could be undocumented immigrants, weren't afraid to gather and march down Buford Highway in Chamblee, suburban Atlanta, Georgia, and then all convene at Plaza Fiesta, which, if you're not from Metro Atlanta, you don't understand. Plaza Fiesta is this huge shopping center. It is literally, it's like the heart of Hispanic Northeast Atlanta. It is. Yes, there's a Ross Dress for Less, and I've been there before. But there's a great Mexican. There's so many reasons why, if I were, say, an ICE official charged with, I don't know, a quota, and these are all facts, and needed to hit a number, that's an easy mark. My God, it's like fishing out of a barrel, a huge barrel full of fish. Brave, man, so brave. And the thing that I was, starting to dive into before I had to hit my break here earlier, a segment ago, was just the nonsense. This is such utter nonsense. the ICE raids, the using military aircraft, and this is all visuals, right? This isn't about anything substantive or even fiscally responsible. The things that we were raised to believe that that's what Republicans, conservatives were all about, being fiscally responsible and adherence to law and order. We have a felon that's a president, and he's blowing money hand over fist to show that he's serious about deporting the cheap labor that businesses and the farming community that conservatives tell you they're all about supporting, tell you that they need. There was this piece in BBC News a few days ago. Let me give some of the audio to this.
You can't just say, hey, I'm going to get rid of these people and then look at the farmers that are left without workers.
You're not going to get an entitled American to come out and do the work that we do. It's hot. There's mosquitoes out here. It's an uncomfortable situation.
What do you tell someone who says, I'm not a farmer, I don't hire undocumented immigrants, this doesn't affect me?
Good for them. Get ready to pay more at the grocery store.
And then Trump over the weekend with his tariff war. And by the, did we really just send our Secretary of State Marco Rubio to Panama to threaten that we're going to take back the Panama? Are we seriously doing that? Are we seriously still talking about paying for Greenland? Oh, my God. Anyway, Donald Trump, when he was running for president, didn't say stuff like this.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion.
No.
We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that. We're going to change it fast. We're going to make America great again. We have to focus on our country. We have tremendous potential if properly used, and we have to focus on our country. Tremendous deficits with China, tremendous deficits with the European Union, tremendous deficits with Mexico and Canada.
Okay, so I want to read to you from Zach Taylor. He is a professor of public policy at Georgia Tech. Over the weekend, he, a couple hours ago, early this morning, Monday, wrote on his Facebook profile some quick takes on the tariffs. He says, no, I don't like what Trump is doing. It's very destructive. In the short run, it could really screw up some supply chains. I think supply chains were largely responsible for the inflationary impact that we felt as Americans. I know, Maga, you didn't hear that from your preferred sources, but we all along knew that. That's me talking, not Zach. Professor Taylor goes on. U.S. imports are only around 15% of GDP, and it's a very diverse bunch of products. Only around 10% of imports are energy. Another 10% are related to transportation, cars, trucks, parts. The rest is all over the place. So Trump's tariffs are not necessarily an economic apocalypse. So let's, on the left, park the car a little bit, pump the brakes just a bit about apocalyptic talk from an economic point of view. But listen to what Professor Taylor does say. They will be spread widely and cost every American around $1 to $4 per day, depending on how one spends. That's only, he says, around $500 to $1,500 per year. That's painful, but not catastrophic. And since globalization is causing a lot of inequality, taxing trade is, quote, not crazy, especially if governments use the money to help the losers from globalization. Well, we know that that's not. Anyway, after all, taxes have to come from somewhere, and consumption taxes are the most efficient and least invasive to gather. Trade wars, he writes, however, are stupid and wasteful. I much prefer multilateral treaty, but a trade war may be politically necessary to get people to actually compromise. So some good could come out of this in a few years, Professor Taylor writes. Here's how he finishes, though. Trump may have just screwed himself. Congress delegated trade policy to the President of the United States in 1934 for a reason. It was a hornet's nest, he writes. So Trump just bought himself a political maelstrom that he may eventually regret. He has neither the brains, bandwidth, nor staff to handle this. So interest groups and politicians may step in to guide this thing to a more productive outcome in the long run. Remember, much of Trump's presidency is about optics, not substance. Don't get fooled, he writes. He's right. It is a lot about optics, which again explains why we're spending, billions of dollars to use military cargo planes, which, by the way, to me is like cruel and unusual. Military cargo planes to send undocumented immigrants back to whatever country we're going to send them back to. Or if we're going to send the the alleged criminal immigrant back to Gitmo to live in a prison that we had set aside for international terrorists. And I was talking earlier about the complexities of being Governor Brian Kemp or a Georgia Republican who has put a lot of political capital and our taxpayer dollars here in the state of Georgia on the line to back electric vehicle manufacturing, green energy. Ew, green energy. Trump has taken on the EV mandate. And we had a piece here from Zachary Hansen and Drew Kahn in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that spoke to that. The policies Trump aims to unplug focus on providing extra juice for EV companies and makes to accelerate their U.S. investments, includes the projects that have gravitated to Georgia and promise to create tens of thousands of jobs. Experts say the whiplash in federal support likely won't change the global direction of electrifying transportation and other sectors, but it could surrender ground to the American international rivals, such as China. We're going into a trade war with China and Mexico and Canada, and yet we're ceding ground on what is clearly the current and future economic growth sector, y'all. The risk is ceding more territory to global competitors who are at times global adversaries, said Albert Gore, executive director of the EV industry trade group Zero Emission Transportation Association. The article goes on to say Georgia Republican leaders, including Governor Brian Kemp, have said supporting a domestic EV and battery sector is a matter of national security, attempting to prevent China from monopolizing those industries. Kemp's office did not respond to a request for comment for this article. Yeah, because it's kind of an awkward spot they're in, right? The article continues, while Georgia is set to benefit from that EV push, Kemp and other state leaders said they support Trump's move to roll back much of the future federal support for these industries, arguing they distort the free market. What? Okay, here's the quote. When the government picks winners and losers, consumers lose every single time, according to Representative Buddy Carter from St. Simon's Island, whose district includes Hyundai Motor Group's newly opened $7.6 billion EV factory. He says, I'm proud that President Trump rescinded the electric vehicle mandate so that Georgians, not federal bureaucrats, can choose the best car for them. Here's the thing, though. This isn't really a mandate. It's not like you have to go to a car dealer right now and all you've got on the lot are electric vehicles. There's no actual mandate. And that's something that Kathy Harris, director for clean vehicles at the nonprofit Natural Resources Defense Council, argues. Most auto manufacturers still produce gas-powered models, the article goes on to say, and consumers can choose between buying and driving an internal combustion vehicle or an electric one. Former President Joe Biden's administration finalized stiffer tailpipe emission standards, which may require most manufacturers to offer mostly EVs by the early 2030s. Y'all, we're still like 8-9 years from that. Kathy Harris did say it appears the tailpipe regulations are among the rules that Trump's administration wants to act, but doing so will require the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to complete a lengthy rulemaking process that could take years. And by that time, we could be going the other direction politically, environmentally, economically. Then there are the tax incentives for customers to buy EVs and for companies to build them in the U.S., like in St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Buddy Carter, well, not literally, but in his district near St. Simon's. Those were created by the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden's signature health and climate law, the article goes on to say. Based on Trump's campaign rhetoric and the executive orders, Kathy Harris said it appears those are also among the targets the administration will try to eliminate. Nonsensically, if you ask me. But because they are signed into law, doing so would require Congress to pass a new law. I mean, Trump's been skirting Congress for the first 2 weeks of his presidency. Why wait on them? Harris saying, on the tax credits, that's the law of the land right now, and that would take congressional action. But Elon Musk is in the Treasury, so he's got a hold of all the money. And what's next? He'll get the keys to the IRS, and he'll have a bunch of collegiate and, barely in college goons meddling around and dealing with that. Back to the article. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade group representing nearly all major automakers besides Tesla, said Trump's promised rollback addresses a, quote, mismatch between current EV market dynamics and the emissions and EV sales targets called for in recent regulations. There's a saying in the auto business, you can't get ahead of the customer. John Bozelis, the organization's president and CEO, said, we can't have regulations that push the industry too far ahead of the customer. Still, any rollbacks of emission standards or EV incentives the administration is able to execute would have global implications for the fight to curb climate change, Harris said. The U.S. transportation sector is responsible for, get this, y'all, 28% of the economy's overall carbon pollution, more than any other part of the economy, according to federal data from 2022, the most recent full year available. And according to the EPA, the lifetime emissions of EVs are lower than those of gas-powered vehicles, and all-electric models don't produce any tailpipe pollution once on the road. Back after this, The Ron Show, America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. Final few moments of today's Ron Show. I want to thank State Senator Jason Estevez again for joining me early this morning to discuss the prospects of Medicaid expansion here in the state of Georgia. Makes complete, total, utter fiscal sense even. It's fiscally conservative compared to the money being wasted on Governor Kemp's Pathways program. We also have $27 billion on the line when it comes to green energy. And Governor Kemp of the Republican Party, who is run by President Donald Trump and his family at the federal level, is in an awkward spot. Stanley Dunlop at the Georgia Recorder writing, at Trump's inauguration, he promised to attack the nation's energy crisis, in quotes, by lowering costs and reducing the nation's dependence on foreign energy sources. Trump's executive orders also include an EV mandate, which is intended to eliminate governmental regulations and subsidies that benefit electric vehicle manufacturing by effectively, quote, mandating their purchase and over gas-powered vehicles. But as we said before, there really is no mandate. You can pull up to a lot at any dealership right now and have your choice. There were sunsets on tailpipe emissions of certain sorts that were a decade or so off in the future. Back to Dunlop. Georgia's top elected and economic development officials, as well as clean energy advocates, are closely watching the shift in policy regarding electric mobility, especially given the state's $27 billion bet on the electric transportation industry since 2018. The clean energy rollbacks could also spell the end of a popular federal income tax credit of up to $7,500 for the purchase of electric and plug-in hybrid cars. Hybrid, y'all, that's fuel and electric. Several days prior to Trump's inauguration, 9 Georgia-based clean energy advocates sent a letter to the newly sworn in Congress urging its members to keep supporting federal clean energy and climate policies and expressing, quote, adamant opposition to any attempt to reverse the effects under new leadership. Further down, Georgia is leading the nation in new clean energy jobs and private investment, including a projected 43,000 new jobs created since August of 2022, according to a January 16th report from environmental watchdog Climate Power. Georgia is a major reason why the Southeast is the national leader for EV and battery-related jobs and private sector investment, according to a 2024 report from the Clean Alliance. Georgia earned the group's top spots in the region for its projected 27,394 new jobs and investments exceeding $24 billion. Tax incentives offered by the state, with the strong backing of Republican Governor Brian Kemp, were used to secure commitments from Hyundai and Rivian to build electric-powered vehicles at massive new plants that employ thousands of people. Hyundai started producing electric SUVs in October. Rivian plans to resume work on its plant about an hour east of Atlanta in 2026 after the Biden administration jump-started the partially completed project last year with $6.6 billion loan that was pushed through before Trump was sworn in. The state offered $1.5 billion incentive package that would give Rivian tax breaks based on the number of jobs and other investments into a plant for producing electric SUVs and crossovers. The loan was offered after Democratic U.S. Senator John Ossoff made a frequent visit for federal aid to save a project that he said would threaten Georgia's economic future if it wasn't completed. Never mind all the money that had already thrown into getting it jump-started in the first place. Solar manufacturer Q-Cells officials have cited the major tax breaks offered through the landmark climate bill passed in 2022 as playing a major role in its Dalton plant expansion. Tax credits have also been important in spurring auto parts suppliers to produce electric vehicle components at a $7 billion Hyundai plant near Savannah in Georgia, red state, Georgia. Here we are again, Georgia voter. We're at the find out portion of f*** around and find out. Here's this quote, Mark Woodall, lobbyist for the Sierra Club of Georgia. EVs are coming one way or the other. I mean, we'll see what they do about the $7,500 tax credit. The Chinese have the largest car market in the world now. In 2024, they were down to 50% gasoline, and the rest of it is hybrids and EVs. If Georgia and the United States do not move forward with electric vehicles, the Chinese are going to eat our lunch. Trump's attempts to freeze federal grants also targeted the unspent funds for a national EV charging station program that's been in place since 2022, Stanley Dunlop writes. Georgia has been investing its share of $135 million distributed over 5 years to build a network of stations along interstates and highways. Ryan McKinnon, a spokesperson for Charge Ahead Partnership, a coalition of businesses and individuals advocating for development of a national charging network, said there remains a huge need for strategically placed plug-in stations so that more owners of electric-powered automobiles and hybrids don't worry about getting stranded on the road because their car battery died. In August, several Georgia Democratic congressional lawmakers announced that the state was awarded a $27 million grant to install 200 chargers in Middle Georgia and to build a fast-charging hub at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Only the world's busiest airport. The state's largest charging network is managed by Georgia Power, a member of Drive Electric Georgia, a coalition of utilities, car dealers, and manufacturers and EV companies. Georgia Power, by the way, in this awkward situation where they're being asked to draw down their fossil fuel consumption and use while also having to deal with the surge of data centers. The bulk of Georgia Power's projected energy growth is tied to massive data centers to support the booming demand for artificial intelligence technology that drives internet search engines and other new software. In November, the company cited several dozen prospective companies expressing interest in opening massive data center facilities in Georgia, primarily focused around Metro Atlanta. According to the Department of Energy, data centers consume 10 to 50 times as much electricity as the average commercial building. The data centers are also known to bring voracious water requirements to communities that bring them in. By the way, I'm reading from a Georgia Recorder article also written by Stanley Dunlop. Man, he's all over this. Southern Environmental Law Center Senior Attorney Jennifer Whitfield said the Georgia Power is seeking to extend dirty coal-burning generators that will pose financial and environmental risks to ratepayers and people living in the communities surrounding the plants. Coal, quote, she says, is not only an expensive and dirty fuel that Georgia Power didn't even want a couple of years ago for some of these plants, but the data centers don't want it either. They want clean energy. And here we are at the federal level, now walking away from clean energy as both the current and obvious future growth sector in the energy economy of not just this country, but of the world. We're going into trade wars that are going to cost us consumers anywhere from $1 to $4 a day. Hey, depending on what you make, that can be impactful or no big deal. But we're going to pay the price now, wherever we buy goods, for a trade war with nations that we're tired of losing to, we hear, while also promising to lose to in the current and future energy sector of the economy by looking back towards 20th century energy options and not walking and chewing gum at the same time as the Biden administration did. Say what you will about progressive, pragmatic, moderate, conservative. What the Biden administration was doing was actually pragmatic. They were looking towards the green energy future and building towards it in red states, for God's sakes. They weren't even doing it for political purposes. They were walking and chewing gum for a green energy future while also realizing current needs. Donald Trump is looking backwards on this. That's it for today. Show notes at ronshowatl.com. We air 9 a.m., 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Have yourselves a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.